Gospel this morning is from Matthew's Gospel, the 17th chapter, beginning at the first verse. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. And suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And while he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And when the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." Here ends the gospel. It's a strange word, transfiguration. Remember, if you can even remember using that. Ever talk to anybody about transfiguration? It's something we don't think very much about. But it's an important part of our lives. In some respect, you've witnessed it, you've seen it, not described the way the Bible described it. But you have to remember that the ancient writers were trying to make situations understandable to a wide variety of people, and so they used whatever means they had. Sometimes they used stories, sometimes they used events that seemed to our world so very strange, but they didn't seem that way to them. They had a different view of life and a different view of the world. And so when we look at this stuff, we have to try to get down deep into it. I'm always amazed at the people who say they take the Bible literally true. In my opinion, don't take it literally enough, because they don't dig down deep enough. So this word transfiguration in this story is an important story, but what does it mean to us today? I want to tell you about a person in one of the congregations I served years ago. This man was an executive with Raytheon Corporation, and he was largely working in their defense programs. So he was working with weapon systems and rockets and aiming devices and all the other things. I don't understand what exactly it was. But he was marketing stuff to our military, but also to other militaries friendly to us. And so he would talk sometimes about some of these miraculous weapon systems. We've seen them at work. They don't seem to be that miraculous to me, but they are effective. And when we have those weapon systems on our own side, we're happy with them. When the other side has them, we're not very happy at all. This was a type A personality guy. I'm going to call him Steve. Steve was a type A personality. He always had things going on, you know, and he was always quick to organize things. And he was a very outgoing guy, so that everybody in the congregation knew him. And he used the phrase, "That's a no-brainer," all the time. Now, I don't know if you use that phrase, but I don't like that phrase. Well, how are you going to make that decision? That's practically a no-brainer. Well, I know, I've been thinking about it for a while here, so obviously I have no brain, because it seems a little bit more complex to me. That's a no-brainer. He was one of those kinds of people who tried to, you know, kind of cut his path through life. Now he decided that we needed a chairperson of the missions committee. The missions committee had been fairly active, but Steve's opinion was that the mission committee could be much more active. And he was going to streamline the mission committee. And he was going to get this mission committee to stand up and roar, you know, this was his idea. And so he asked me, what job should we tackle first? And I said, well, you know, we're hearing more and more about hunger in our communities and hunger in our world. And he said, well, you know, I'm a little bit skeptical about all these hungry people. I said, oh, really? He says, yeah, you know, I don't know. People talk about there's so many hunger. I don't know where those statistics come from. I said to him, well, Steve, you know what you ought to do is you ought to go to the Worcester Food Bank. Here's the director's name, and go and talk to her and see what you think. And so he got a couple of people from the committee together, and about 4 of them went to the Worcester Food Bank, and the director of the Worcester Food Bank took them on a tour of Worcester County. Took them into the homes of some of the families that need the food bank. Talked to other pastors and social workers and visiting nurses. He was in one home of an elderly person, and he saw the cat food in the closet, but no cat. And he saw families where towards the end of the month, they were really scratching for anything to eat. And a can of vegetables and maybe a couple of slices of bread was something he saw very commonly. Now, he had taken this job to add to his list of experiences. Do you know anybody like that? You know, you get, well, I've experienced this, and, you know, it's kind of like filling out a resume. I think he thought about his life pretty much in terms of a resume. This is going to look good on my resume. I was the chairperson of the church's mission committee. Well, they did this tour, and they talked to a lot of people, and he did a lot of research. He worked hard at this, and his committee worked right beside him. And so one night at a council meeting, they were going to present a plan that they had come up with, this mission committee. And he said, when he started speaking, I know that some of you are skeptical of this hunger situation and the numbers that we see. And so he started to describe this, and he talked about old people, and he talked about children. And then he started to cry. Tough Steve started to cry. And the reaction in the room, about 20 people, I guess, were in that room, was amazing. All of us got uncomfortable right away. But some people got to the point where they just wanted him to shut down. They wanted to shut this off. What was happening here? You know, it's like, it's like if somebody had said to you, well, Tim's going to be on sabbatical because he's got a job with the New York Metropolitan Ballet, and he's going to be in Swan Lake. And you would say, what? Well, in psychological terms, this is called cognitive dissonance. You know something, but then you get a fact that it just doesn't fit together, and you say, that can't be right. That's what people were experiencing when Steve started to cry about this hunger situation and what he had seen, and he gave his report. And I'll tell you something, Steve became a new person in our eyes at that very minute, because I would have never guessed. If anybody would have said to me, who's the first one in this group of mission people whose hearts will really get broken and softened over this, I would have put him last. Transfiguration, you see. And he led the congregation in a massive food gathering. And his drive and his organizational skills paid off. He enlisted 2 grocery chains in this. He enlisted 3 other churches. And they literally collected tons of food. And then there was another group of people who wanted in on it, and Steve made sure that they made the transition and led the organization. And he went on to a ministry with the mission group of people with AIDS. And that, too, was a wonderful story. But he made contacts with politicians and local agencies, and as I say, all kinds of other pastors and helping agencies. And about 125 people in our congregation at that time, it was about half the congregation, worked on that project. 125 people were involved. They were talking about it. It was a shining moment. It was a shining light in that congregation's history. Now, Jesus has this shining moment for us in this story. And if we can't understand it in terms of ourselves and what we can do and what the possibilities are for us or what we see around us, then it's a meaningless story. But obviously, if it's told to us and Jesus was part of it, it can't be meaningless. So then what is the meaning? The meaning is that you have to have these shining moments to get through the tough times that come after. That's why it's described on a mountaintop. You know, when you're on the mountain, the air is clear and everything. You can see for miles and it's beautiful. Many of you have had a lot of those experiences. But then, like life, you know, it starts to go downhill. And you get into the other stuff. And you wonder, why couldn't it just been like it was on the mountain? Clean and crisp and clear. The truth is, you know and I know that every one of us has been enrolled in the school of suffering, whether we wanted it or not. We didn't sign up for this. We're not paying the tuition, but we're in the school. And when we look at these little kids who bounce around here, and you think, those such bright and wonderful little kids and so smart. But their seat in the school of suffering is waiting too. And they're going to be in it with us. Now, for Jesus, we hear about this glorious time of affirmation when God says, this is the way a human being should be. This is what I expect of faith and courage. Listen to him, we hear God say. Listen to him, his way, his words, because all of that is what shapes who we are. And we note in this the confusion of the disciples. Peter, who is kind of like a Steve, you know, Peter was kind of a type A personality, I think. Peter says, I'll build 3 tents. I'll build these 3 houses, see? And you'll have one, and Moses will have one, and Elijah will have one. And then we can bring tour groups up, see? Let's go up the mountain and see the tents, because this is where God was, and we saw this, and it was wonderful, and here's a brochure, and would you like a DVD, and all these other kinds of things like we see in our own tourist thing. Let's institutionalize this so that somebody will come and say, I just want to touch the tent. I just want to touch the tent. And when we were up there, wasn't it amazing, you know? You can't institutionalize these experiences, can you? They come to us. They're powerful and they're wonderful, and we love them and we believe in them, and we want to share them with whoever we can. But the truth of the matter is, when you're open to them, they happen and then they're gone. And some people are not open to them. Some people could have been standing there and said, whoa, I don't want any of this. It's too bright. I forgot my sunglasses. And what's all this stuff about these other people, Moses, Elijah? Come on. And so it's missed the whole experience. And you know what that's like too. You know that what that's like every time you have something important to say and the person you want to say it to won't hear you. Or they can't hear you. Or they're too distracted. And quite frankly, in our society, we are almost always distracted. You know, I think that most of us suffer from spiritual ADD. Our attention disorder, as far as spirituality goes, is amazing. Me, as bad as anybody else, can get so distracted and carried away by things which in the end don't make any difference at all. And yet God is patient with us, and God is loving, and God continues to call us to do the things that God needs us to do. Not that God wants us to do, but God needs us to do if the world is going to change for the better. At my daughter Sarah's wedding, when she married Garrett, I was obviously the minister, and I don't usually do wedding sermons, but this is my own kid, so obviously I had to say something. And so I read a piece from Mr. Rogers, The World According to Mr. Rogers. I remember her sitting in front of the television, this little blonde kid staring at Mr. Rogers, and I'm thinking, come on, Rogers, can move a little faster here, right? And she was loving every minute of it. Mr. Rogers understood what you had to do to make children listen. And children wanted to listen to him. Anyway, this is one of the things he said, and I read at the wedding. In the external scheme of things, shining moments are as brief as the twinkling of an eye, and yet such twinklings are what eternity is made of. Moments when we human beings can say, I love you, I'm proud of you, I forgive you, I am grateful for you. That's what eternity is made of, invisible, imperishable, good stuff. That's the shining moment that we need. Those high moments when our spiritual strength is opened up and filled, and it helps us to be courageous people when times are very tough, which times we all have. That I love you, I'm proud of you, I forgive you, I am grateful for you. Those are the words that come from God to you and me. Those are the words, the exact words. If you had to boil everything down, you couldn't pick much better words than this. God says, I love you. I'm proud of you. I forgive you. I'm grateful for you. If you and I take those kinds of things into us as our shining moment with God, what would it do to you? What would it do to you to really believe that God is proud of you? I'm not talking about everything you've ever done or I've ever done. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about as a human being with potential in this world, God is proud of you. Listen to him means that these grace-filled words come from God for you and me, and they're not to be forgotten or shoved aside. And sometimes in the darkness of your heart or soul, when things get bad, we always hope that these words bounce back to us and that we listen again and again and they come back to us. We don't hear them much in the grind of everyday life, do you? Have any of you ever had a boss said, you know, I've been thinking about you, Fred. And as far as an employee goes, I really love you. I'm proud of you. I forgive you if there were times when you thought I was a crummy boss. I'm grateful for you. Ever hear that in your job? The truth is, there's people who've never heard it from their parents. They've never heard it from their loved ones. And sometimes in counseling situations, I'm astounded at what people will not say to the person they love. The words that that person needs to hear, and they will not say it. But God says it. And so in everyday life, when stress has a hold of us, or when we are wrapped in grief, or when we are angry about life for some reason, or we are fearful, when we are lonely, when we feel weak, these words come to us from God. I love you. I am proud of you. I forgive you. I am grateful for you. In faith, we stop and listen over and over again. And then we can live. Amen. It is our custom on Communion Sunday to stand and offer shaking hands with your neighbor and offer them the peace of Christ.